Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Calhoun's. If you're not eating at Calhoun's before or after Tennessee's game with UTEP next week, eat at one of the 4 Calhoun's locations in Neyland Stadium. Or get a Feed 5 or Feed 10 family pack for your pregame or postgame activities. If you're tailgating at the game, let Calhoun provide that if you're not eating at Calhoun's. And if you're not eating at Calhoun's in the stadium. In other words, when it's a UT football game day, eat at Calhoun's, any of their locations. They do a great job. The taste of Tennessee. All right. I want to welcome in the next round of panelists, 2 longtime sports writers, 2 guys who've been with me for 16 years now. Bob Hodge right here, down there, Chuck Cavaleras. Appreciate you guys for joining us. This is our Hot Read segment, so I'm pairing you guys up. Everybody gets a 2.5, 3-minute question. Start with Bob and Will. We'll talk about the pass rush a little later, okay? So if you want to get into it, we can, but I'm going to talk more about it later. In every other aspect, though, I thought the defense, it's hard to argue. I thought the defense looked good yesterday. We got some numbers, I think, just to throw up here for folks at home. If we can get that, great. If not, don't worry about it. Guys, your thoughts on the defense and the way they played yesterday?
Boy, I don't want to come out and just start like being negative right off the bat.
So I didn't see it right? Okay, a 3-point game was a bad game for the defense?
But it was ETSU. And I mean, you have to take that into consideration that you're talking about guys who I don't know if anybody on ETSU's roster would play in the SEC.
Randy Sanders told their announcers, they told the story during the game, he was bragging on one of their players because he said, now he could make an ACC roster and contribute. And the thinking is, so you've got a standout on the ETSU roster who could make an ACC roster and contribute.
And that ain't in the SEC. Yeah. So yes, it was a great game, but against that kind of an opponent, I think you have to expect that
But
kind
at
of
least
game.
they did what they're supposed to do. I mean, on offense, you didn't even do what you're supposed to do.
Right.
Mainly, when pass rush didn't. But.
Yeah, I mean, these guys, at least, you got to give, like Bryce Thompson, you got to see some young guys earn some confidence. Last week they played West Virginia. They got a lot of points scored on them. They got beat a lot. You know, that for a young player like that, you love to see that. Derek Kirkland Jr., guy's been injured a lot, able to come up and make a play. You know, so you're hoping that maybe this gives them more confidence. We've talked about that, you know, sometimes the defense looks like they held their heads down at times and just wasn't ready to play in the sense of if they had a bad play, it affected them for 2 and 3 plays. Hopefully you can start taking something like this and get them out of that motion and get them out of that thought process. But, I mean, you're still looking for stuff.
Yeah.
This isn't clear stuff you can point at because it is ETSU. You have to search for it to find the positive.
Yeah, you have to say that they tackled better.
If they tackle better, if you want a positive, is a couple times the backs got to the edge and Tennessee was able to run them down. So,
and I'll give one thing that they did a lot better than they did last year. Last year, guys, you know, when a blocker came to kick them out, there was no consistency of did they get under the block and make the guy bounce outside or keep him inside. I thought this team was much better coached at being able to do that. I noticed that several times. Last year, I didn't think they were consistent or really knew or felt like they knew what they were supposed to be doing.
Okay. All right. Very good. Let's go. Bob Raincloud today. Jimmy and Chuck, the offensive line was terrible early, as we mentioned earlier. After a quarter, East Tennessee had 0 rushing yards and actually led in the rushing attack. They had 0. You had -1 after 8 against an FCS team. People said they wouldn't miss a beat with Ryan Johnson instead of Brandon Kennedy, and they didn't. They still stunk early like they did against West Virginia. Your thoughts? You had to shuffle the offensive line with Kennedy out. It didn't look good the week before either. You wound up, and I thought this was pretty disappointing, 4.3 yards per carry. So if you're sitting there saying, well, they got better, you still average 4.3 yards per carry against the Southern Conference team. Thoughts on the offensive line? Chuck, I'll start with you since you're just getting out here, and then Jimmy, you file into it.
It's like, how do you explain the slow starts with the 2 game as a sample size? And, you know, you whiffed on 2 blocks your first play yesterday. West Virginia, you had an offensive lineman first play of the game go the wrong way, and your quarterback gets drilled, and you lose 10 yards on a pass. So how do you explain the slow start, especially against inferior competition? You think you would come out ready to go, and who are you going to run behind if it's 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 in an SEC game? I mean, I think you got to figure some of these things out because I don't know if you've got that right now, and you certainly don't feel like Trey Smith is 100% yet either.
I think you're still trying to run wide rather than run up the gut. I think you're better running those outside type runs than you are the power runs up the middle. Jeremy Banks hit the hole hard.
Right.
But a lot of those times, you saw it last week with Jordan, there are times where it's more, and you saw this going back in a while when Jalen Hurd, we used to say this, it was more the running back than it was the offensive line opening big holes, because Hurd used to, and Kamara too, had to sidestep guys in the backfield.
Get away from guys 2 yards in the backfield.
Jimmy has offensive line, I mean, it can be deceiving because corners didn't get a real test yesterday. But his offensive line moved up on your list. Is it now the #1 worry for you? It is for me.
It is #1, and it's
or it might have been your #1 going in.
It was. Well, I remember us having a discussion a while back about people being optimistic the line would be a lot better, and I was one of the dissenting votes on that. The fact that you had 8 carries for -1 yards in the first quarter against a team like ETSU is unforgivable for me. Now, Jeremy Pruitt gave a lot of credit to ETSU. Stunts, stemming, movement, and all that gave him problems. And I know Ryan Johnson took over at the center position, but still, you're an SEC team going against people. I don't think one of those guys on defense could play for many SEC teams. So you should have been able to run it anyway. That to me is a big red flag that Tennessee, I just don't think Tennessee is very physical with their offensive line. I don't know that Trey Smith is a physical offensive lineman. Maybe Carvin will be, maybe some others will be. I just don't see it right now, and I think that's going to be really problematic against SEC front fours.
You're going from one of the worst teams in the FCS level to the worst team in the FBS level this week in UTEP. 14-game losing streak they're riding as they come into Neyland Stadium. Still, I would think if there was one game on the schedule, ETSU is the one where you should have just been able to line up and just push people out of your way. You should have just been able to blow them off the ball, and you couldn't do it. Now, maybe you do it against UTEP, but
and John,
I'm with you. To me, I was most worried about the secondary and the corners coming into the season. I'm now most worried about that offensive line.
Wasn't it just 3 years ago those same kind of red flags were going up against Appalachian State?
Yep.
And here we are again.
Well, and Appalachian State, though, was a much better opponent than what you got right now. But I'm going to go back to what Jimmy said about thinking the offensive line would be better. I was one of the ones who thought before West Virginia
you get for being positive.
It would be better. Yeah. Not another positive statement until some point.
Yeah. Is that all you were going to say?
That's it. I don't know what that point is.
I was going to make a point there, but now it's gone. So, all right. When we come back, we will be joined by Daniel Hood, Sterling Hinton. This is our 3 up, 3 down segment. They're going to tell you 3 guys that had really good games yesterday and 3 guys who didn't. Come on back.